At the bottom of our planet lies the coldest and most isolated continent in our world. With wind speeds of up to 100 miles per hour, the average temperature, a negative 71 degrees Fahrenheit, and 98% of the land is covered in a thick ice shelf. Only a few wildlife species make Antarctica their permanent home. With a whopping 5.5 million square miles of landmass, Antarctica is larger than the United States and all of Europe's combined. This frozen continent is classified as a desert, with the interior of the continent receiving less than 2 inches of rainfall annually. The frigid air holds very little moisture, resulting in minimal snowfall, which then doesn't melt but builds up as ice. The ice covering Antarctica is a staggering 1.2 miles thick, with places as deep as 3 miles. Boasting several mountain ranges, Mount Vinson is the tallest at 16,050 feet. Antarctica is also home to hundreds of freshwater lakes, unfrozen and buried deep within the ice. Several active volcanoes can be observed on the surface, such as Mount Erebus, which has a persistent lava lake and actively spews tiny crystals of real metallic gold within its volcanic gases. Scientists estimate about 80 grams or $6,000 worth daily are spewed. While hidden deep below, scientists have found a volcanic system estimated to have as many as 91 volcanoes active and dormant. These help to provide geothermal heat deep within the interior of Antarctica, with the outer ice providing a type of insulation. This mysterious continent also experiences extreme day and night cycles, with darkness called austral winter lasting for 6 months, and continual daylight or austral summer the remaining 6. Around 235 animal species make Antarctica their permanent home, such as the emperor penguin, leopard seals, and the pink-faced sheathbill. The continent is surrounded by the Southern Ocean, a nutrient-rich water that supports vast populations of Antarctic krill, which feeds the whales, orca, and dolphins that live just off the shores. The ocean also holds over 320 fish species and diverse invertebrates on the seabed, with estimates of up to 20,000 benthic species. Antarctica's plant life is limited but resilient, dominated by non-vascular plants like mosses, liverworts, lichens, and algae. They thrive in less than 1% of ice-free areas. Claimed to have been discovered in January of 1820, but the Perry-Reese map of 1513 famously depicts an Antarctic coastline without ice, as well as the Orontes Phineas map of 1531, also without ice. But in 1818, the Pinkerton World Map was published, and Antarctica was suspiciously missing from the globe. With modern technology and satellite images, new maps of the Antarctic coastline surprisingly match up with the Perry-Reese map of 1513. If Antarctica was buried deep under miles of ice, as scientists claim, how did the map maker create such a map? Did he copy an older map? Something pre-Ice Age? With no evidence of inhabitants or even mentions of civilizations, at least not on the surface, some claim it is the original location of Atlantis. Aristotle, who was alive in 384 to 322 BC, spoke of a southern landmass to balance the northern hemisphere. He called it Antarcticos, or opposite the north, with other translations, or opposite the bear. This doesn't mean a polar bear. It referred to the bear constellations that can only be viewed in the North Pole skies, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. If Aristotle knew about Antarctica so long ago, how? There are no permanent human residents currently on Antarctica, just temporary research personnel and very few tourists who have to get permission from their government state department before they can visit. Most of Antarctica is specifically managed thanks to the Antarctic Treaty signed in 1958 and proposed by U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower. The treaty was originally signed by 12 nations, and that list has grown to 58 nations today. Some key points of the Antarctic Treaty are: Antarctica is for peaceful purposes only. For scientific investigation and cooperation towards that end, Scientific observations and any results from Antarctic investigations shall be exchanged and made freely. Environmental protection banning nuclear testing, suspended territorial claims, and banning on its vast resources. The treaty never expires, and in 2048, the treaty can be reviewed but not broken. In the world we know today, never have the nation's powers come together for scientific research and environmental preservations like they've come together for the Antarctic Treaty. So what really is happening under the ice at the bottom of the world? Welcome to Rebel Road. I'm Mary.
And I'm Haley. Welcome back, everyone, to a very wild and bizarre episode of Rebel Road. We are so happy you are taking the time to listen to us. We really are just two gals trying to make sense of all the weird on this earth. And sometimes you have to stop and set down all of that learned history and what you think is true and say, okay, I'm going to listen. So let's discuss this. Tell me why. You know what I mean, Mary?
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a fragile thing, trust. And I think that is what everything boils down to. What are you going to trust? With questions over everything today, people are doing a few things. Blindly trusting the government and official agencies, or they're doing the opposite, not trusting a darn thing. Everything is wrong. It's all lies. And then we have this group of people who are seeing the cracks in the history, cracks in the details, and are actually doing their own research and are beginning to listen to discussions and making decisions based on their own found discoveries.
Yeah, and there it is, listening to the idea that this could very well be true and then looking into it deeper on their own. You can hear the craziest thing and brush it off, or you can think, I wonder, and begin looking into that. Like the adorable platypus. You know, people laughed at the idea of an animal with the tail of a beaver and the mouth of a duck that lays eggs. It sounds ridiculous, but researchers stumbled upon him in 1798. And even then, when they sent sketches to the scientific communities, people still thought it was a hoax. And even though those sketches came from other scientists, they wouldn't bend on their beliefs. So this idea of something so outlandish, the ridiculousness of it, it outweighed the facts until it was accepted as real. And how does that happen? What makes people stop and say, oh no, this is real? There just doesn't seem to be a real answer to that.
Yeah, and that's a hard one. You know, often we look to the dogma found in churches, and dogma, for anyone who doesn't quite know the term, means a principle or set of principles laid down by an authority as absolute truth. So what they say is the real thing. There is no pushing that. There is no boundary. But everyone talks about the dogma of the church, but no one questions the dogma of science. We all know the scientific method. I don't know. Are they still taught that in school now? My kids have been out of school for a while.
I hope they do.
I know, right? But there's some things they don't teach now, and so it drives me crazy. But you remember those science fairs? Well, you would observe something, come up with a question about why that thing that you're observing is doing that. And then you would come up with a hypothesis on why it's doing that. Then you'd create an experiment to prove why you're right, collect the data, and then come to a conclusion. And hopefully your experiment proved your hypothesis. And that is science. That is the scientific method. But if you were right, it's 100% true. There is no misinterpretations. Well, that kind of limits scientists. Observations lead to theories, and it opens the door to human error and potentially disregarding the outlier data, essentially not really knowing. So here's an example. When I went to school, I don't know about you, Haley, but the smallest particle that made everything up, the only thing that we were all consisted of nothing but an atom. You remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It was this invisible thing that made up everything, and it was always vibrating, and the vibrations held, and that's how everything was put together with these atoms. We discovered atomic weapons by splitting the atom, and it's a horrible thing, atomic energy. I don't even know why we're still messing with it. But my point is, now we have quarks, leptons, and these are so small that they're actually made up of zero-dimensional points. Atoms were just all science knew at the time when we went to school. So when someone says to me, this is the science, that is most likely not the end of the story. Science just hasn't found anything further. Let's look at Einstein and his theory of relativity with the stable wormholes and quantum gravity. That is just a theory. It has never been proven, contrary to what watching the Big Bang might have you think. It's still just a theory, but people take it as fact. And that is, I think, a large part of what CERN's doing over there. They're trying to prove his theories. They're trying to find the God particle. They're opening up wormholes. We don't even know what they're doing over there in CERN.
We do need a stop CERN treaty. Who knows what they are really doing? That is an entirely different episode, but I do get what you are saying, Mary. What science says is true and has happened or will happen is not always the case. And so down in the South Pole, we have this amazing mystery that is Antarctica. And according to official records, nothing but scientists are there, just studying the crap out of that ice. And it's just something about that Antarctic Treaty. It screams military industrial complex. What do you think, Mary?
Yep. Well, let's pick up from our last Road Snack episode and Rear Admiral Byrd. Hopefully everybody had listened to that. If not, you can pause it and go back and listen. It's a really good episode, I think. And let's just take a look at his timeline. So Operation High Jump, it was supposed to be an 8-month-long mission and for the U.S. to work out mechanical failures for high altitude flights, like stalling engines and engines seizing up due to the frigid temperatures. Just stuff like that. Like, how do our airplanes fly in these cold, frigid temps? They faced some of these issues in World War I and World War II, so they were really trying to figure this out, as well as a nice, peaceful geological survey of Antarctica. So it seemed like the perfect place to do all this. And they needed 8 months to test this stuff. I think that's a bit excessive. But secondly, High Jump deployed 4,700 men to the Antarctic for these experiments, and that is more than currently are on the continent at any given time. And so also it deployed 13 ships, and we're not talking little ships. We're talking icebreakers, carriers, and warships. A fleet of 33 aircraft, including helicopters, even one of the biggest submarines in the U.S. military, Ballo-class submarine, was also added to the Operation High Jump fleet. So Admiral Byrd was in charge of all of that.
So you have this basically a small army descending on Antarctica to study engine failures due to frigid temps and some land mapping. I am going to agree with you, Mary. That seems very excessive to me, especially the 4,700 men just to do some experiments. That just doesn't seem to line up,
right?
In my mind.
Yeah.
We know Byrd had been there twice previously. As you mentioned in our Road Snack episode last week, he was the golden child of the Navy. And maybe he, to be fair, maybe he just liked to be really prepared. I think we both can understand that. And maybe to be prepared for leopard seals. We know those can be deadly. I think it was in 2003, there was a scientist that was drowned by a leopard seal in Antarctica, dragged her right down into the ice.
Yeah, well, that's terrifying.
Yeah, I know.
But to me, it does seem excessive as well with all of those boats and the submarine and the aircraft and all of those men. But if we look between the official lines, we can find something super interesting. A few years before High Jump, the Germans had a base on Antarctica around 1937 to 1938. And evidently it was to explore the possibility of setting up a whaling station there. So, for whale blubber. Germany used a ton of it and it was importing it and wanted to find a different source on their own because World War II was draining their money. But if you know your Nazis, then you know that they're obsessed with all things esoterical, paranormal, and occult related. They were scouring the earth for advanced civilizations and weaponry. We know Hitler was obsessed with it, but particularly they were interested in Atlantis. Himmler thought it was the key to the Aryan race and that they were the long lost descendants or some sort of kind of a crazy thing that they were thinking there.
Well, Atlantis was thought to be Antarctica by the ancients, right?
I think so. And so most likely the whaling station was a cover. So they were looking for Atlantis and advanced tech, and a whaling station was just like that perfect cover. So Hans Kammler was the German in charge of advanced weapons. He maybe was there about this time, and I have a crazy story about him. When the war was over and the US was closing in, they were rounding up these scientists, right? Because the US wanted them. They wanted their knowledge. And it said that Hans jumped into an advanced looking plane and disappeared along with a few other scientists. Now, did they go to Antarctica? Because no trace was ever found of him or his plane. And we also know that in Argentina, there was a giant German population that kind of exploded around that same time. And Argentina is only like 600 miles from the coast of Antarctica. It's one of the closest populated coasts. So Admiral Donitz, and I probably said his name wrong. It's a German name, Donitz. I can't do a German accent. But anyway, Admiral D of Germany had claimed the Germans had made a warm oasis in Antarctica in an underground base, a Shangri-La land or Shambhala land up to their fuel.
Well, again, in our story in our Road Snack episode about Admiral Byrd, in his notes, he had mentioned a swastika shape on the UFO, again, according to Admiral Byrd. So the speculations is the Germans had set up an underground base. The U.S. went to Antarctica to see if it was true.
Yeah, something like that. World War II ended in 1945. High jump was August of 1947 to February of 1948. So if this was the reason, and I think it could have been, then it was kind of a secret extension of the war. The U.S. was hunting down the Nazi cells for their tech and those scientists. This would make sense of all the men and ships and planes and such that were a part of Operation High Jump. Now, High Jump was cut short, shut down late in February of 1947, just a few days after that mysterious Admiral Byrd flight. They cited weather because the weather had moved in and it had become too dangerous for them to continue. But High Jump was built around actual Antarctica summers. So that's like one of the most mild times to be in Antarctica. The temperatures can be mild as just 38 degrees Fahrenheit, not those negative 71 temperatures. That was kind of a strange reason that they cited for shutting it down, but it did get shut down quite quickly. So Byrd had his flight. If he did see something, he called it, shut it down, and went to the Pentagon with his intel. But there are a few more interesting things. Early March, Byrd made a strange statement to a Chilean newspaper about the U.S. needing to be prepared for war and about crafts being able to fly from pole to pole at alarming speeds. He did several other interviews before his Pentagon meeting, and then after that, he shut down. Like, he stopped talking about all these things. But even more kind of crazy, and about that time, there were whispers and rumors about a lot of military wounded coming into the Argentina and Chilean coastline. And there was a claim that the Germans and U.S. had fought together against some unknown threat. So what did they find there? FDR had died. He had died in 1945, and President Truman was the sitting president during High Jump. And he would have been briefed by Byrd. And during the FDR administration, the increase in UF sightings became highly popular. His wife was actually very obsessed with them. And if we go back to our last episode again with the master, they said that they had tried to contact the world leaders in 1945. And so they were met with hostility. And now we have Truman in 1947, who dealt with Roswell in 1947. So UFOs at that time were zooming all over the place. There were sightings just all over the world. So did they see things they didn't expect there during Operation High Jump? Reports were these ships would come up out of the water and that they would see strange lights under the ice. And many say that the lights in the sky were there all the time. Now, are they UFOs or UAPs, as we're supposed to call them today, which would be unidentified aerial phenomenon? But High Jump took over 70,000 images during their time there. So they did do the survey of the land. But another strange thing, those images and all those reports are still classified to this day and highly redacted if you find any of them.
Mary, earlier you mentioned the Big Bang Theory, and there's also, in the conspiracy theorists community, they talk about how They have to tell us the truth. And there's a lot of truth in the shows that we watch and the movies that we watch. And I just want to mention that this is kind of covered in even in American Horror Story in season 10 in one of those episodes with one of the presidents and the wife's obsession with aliens. So if anyone's interested, maybe go check that out. But 100% they found something under the ice. So let's look at that timeline. We have America or Admiral Byrd there between 1928, 1930, then back again, 1939 to 1941. Then the Germans are there 1937 through 1938, but we have to wonder, did they really leave? Then World War II ends in 1945 with the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That was August 6th and 9th of 1945, potentially an advanced race trying to contact leaders in 1945. FDR died in 1945, I believe in April of 1945. And then we have a new administration taking over with President Truman. And President Truman then sends Admiral Byrd back to Antarctica with a battalion, basically. Remember, 4,700 men. So that was in 1946. And in 1947, then we pull out. All of a sudden, we're talking about Roswell, New Mexico in there, and the mysterious forming of the Majestic 12. Fake or not, you probably need to do your own research on the Majestic 12. But what some might miss is we went back in 1947 and 1948 for Operation Windmill, for more aerial photos and private missions. Admiral Byrd did not lead this expedition. It was led by Finn Ronay, I believe is the correct pronunciation. And these were private expeditions, serving counterpoint to naval military expeditions. And that kind of sounds a little fishy, His was a large expedition as well, with our Navy lending him a ship. And, I just have to say, if you know anything about the U.S. military, they're not lending anybody anything. So they would lend him a ship and then 3 aircraft for support of his mission. And the ship was said to be the City of Beaumont, but there has never been a ship called that. There's the USS Beaumont. It was a ship used in World War II. It was a small gunboat, so that doesn't really make sense for how this mission is described. But there was also a large cargo ship called Courier Beaumont, and that one probably makes the most sense if you look into that. But back to the timeline, Truman left office in 1953, and Eisenhower became the U.S. president. So we all know the mysterious Eisenhower Treaty. He was rumored to have been forced to sign with alien beings in 1954. There was rumors that Eisenhower went missing. And if you look into that, they covered that with he had some dental work done. But others say that he was likely abducted by aliens during that. So we have the U.S. going full force back with Admiral Byrd for Operation Deep Freeze. And this was a long-term mission from 1955 to 1956. They set up the famous McMurdo Station, which is still there. And then we end nicely with the Antarctic Treaty in 1959. So over 30 years of secret missions and interest in this particular continent. And we haven't really left. We also say that during this time, we have a huge leap in technology in the early 50s with smaller electronics like the microchip. But for me, interesting enough that we can, over 30 years, be aligned with other nations to protect this continent.
Yeah, that agreement that Eisenhower supposedly signed was tech for people or something like that. I'm not really sure. So all we can really say is that the U.S. has a very vested interest in Antarctica, so much so that they are like, hey, everyone, they were kind of like, hey, everyone, let's not claim or, crap up this piece of the world. That's very strange. If you start looking into modern day whistleblowers, you will come across people who say that they are doing do research there. So that's direct energy weapons and strange things with neutrinos. They say that they're studying space. They're not actually using Antarctica to listen to the world or to make earthquakes or anything like that. But neutrinos, those usually come from space. And the atmosphere in Antarctica is up 8,000 feet. So there's less atmosphere. So communications are more easily able to be listened to or found. So that makes sense. They're listening to space. But the neutrinos, they come down from space, but there's a strange area in Antarctica where they're coming up from below the ice, and that is not common. I don't know how you feel about that show, Ancient Aliens.
I love it.
Haley.
I love it.
Me too. I do. And I know a lot of people, they hate on that show because it's just one-sided. There's only aliens, there's no God. But there's a lot of facts on that show. There's a lot of history to be found. But if we rabbit hole down into that, then we come across Linda Moulton Howe. And I love her. She's got 4 decades of, investigative journalism behind her back. And she did the interview with the Navy SEALs who came forward with photos and documents from Antarctica. And there were 2 different ones at 2 different times, and they had the same strange story. There's a secret octagonal base somewhere in Antarctica, and it's 2 miles down below the ice. One said that he got there via a submarine. The other one said that it was a 30-meter wide hole that was in the ice, and you would go down this platform to the solid door. And if you just push on the door with one finger, even though it was massive and thick, it just instantly moved. And the inside temp inside the space was around 68 to 72 degrees. So it stayed warm. They said that there was self illumination as they walked along the halls, a green light that followed them. And the walls themselves were like 40 feet tall, made from the black basalt. And so black basalt is very hard. It's not as hard as a diamond, but I think on that scale that they measure hardness, it's like a 7 and a diamond is 10. So, but on these walls were thousands of these precisely carved hieroglyphs resembling Egyptian or Mayan, but it wasn't either of them. It's something in between. It's a language that we don't recognize. And there's no tool marks. And all of these hieroglyphs are carved to exactly the same depth. And I want to say it was like 7 centimeters or something like that. And they said it would take 15 minutes to walk from one side of one room to the other. And the ceiling was like 80 feet tall with no supports. It just kind of hovered over your head. To me, that sounds like a very advanced civilization. And it makes you wonder, was that an advanced civilization, or does that go into the alien complex pile?
I don't know. But the takeaway is people are claiming there are bases under the ice with advanced tech. Are we studying it? Are we trading secrets? Is it some formal entrance to the hollow earth? And that's a whole nother aspect to this story. Admiral Byrd claimed he was caught in a tractor beam and taken to the city inside of the earth. And this sparks claims of proof that there is hollow earth. And this is a crazy theory. That's definitely not something we're being taught in our elementary schools. Today, we are told the earth is a solid mass with a molten core. But like we kind of spoke at the beginning of the episode, we have no proof of this. Is just a theory. Russia has the deepest hole dug at 7.6 miles, but they had to stop because of the extreme heat, which is interesting. And on the opposite side, there are countless stories about a hollow earth in ancient civilizations and texts. So why doesn't the hollow earth theory get just as much respect in our scientific communities, if not more? Because there are hints of a hollow earth from our written and oral histories. It's very similar to the platypus, Mary, but on a bigger scale, right? Seismic activity that we monitor, it does suggest that something with a solid mass is at the center of the Earth. That is proven data. But what if instead of a molten core at the center, there is possibly a smaller sun? A sun would be just as hot, if not hotter, than molten core and would have a dense mass. There are stories from the Buddhists to the Ramayana that culturally speak of hollow earth and its entrances and the people who live there. In 1700, we have my namesake, Edmund Halley, who found Halley's Comet. Fun little side note there. He claimed entrances to Middle Earth could be found at the North and South poles. And Halley suggested the Earth had a shell about 500 miles thick, which is tremendous, with two inner shells and a core, each rotating at different speeds with their own atmospheres and magnetic poles. He developed this extravagant hypothesis to explain anomalies in compass readings, that magnetic variation. Halley thought the inner atmospheres might be luminous and inhabited. And he's a respected astronomer. We have to remember that. And over time, because of the fantasy writings of Tolkien and Jules Verne, which was Journey to the Center of the Earth, his theory became laughable.
Yeah, and that's what happens. Once something becomes just too fantastical or outlandish, the world ridicules it. It's like the crab in the bucket scenario. If you place a single crab in a bucket, it can get out on its own. It has no problem. But if you add more crabs to the bucket, they, instead of working together to get out of the bucket, they just start pulling each other back to the bottom, and no one can escape. The Hopi Indians, their oral tradition is that of the ant people. They said that these ant people helped them to survive two cataclysmic events on the earth, one by fire and one by ice. The ant people took them and brought them into the earth with them and then taught them all sorts of things. And they called them the Anunnaki, or the ant friends. And actually, ant in Hopi is called Anu, so that would have been the Anunnaki. Does that sound familiar?
Definitely so. Honestly, wow, chills. That's such good stuff. And if we go back to Admiral Byrd, he spoke openly about the hollow earth entrance until his Pentagon meeting on March 11th, 1947. The fact of the flight is he was missing for 3 hours. And how did his plane fly that long without refueling? Byrd died in his sleep in 1957, which is probably the best way to go, if I'm going to say that. And his son was oddly found dead in 1988, apparently from dehydration and malnutrition. But let's think about it. How does a prominent man die from dehydration and malnutrition and found in, of all places, an abandoned warehouse? That does not line up. His son, Richard Byrd III, and most don't know this, he accompanied his dad on his Antarctic mission high jump. So he would have known all of his dad's stories, if not seen them with his own eyes, which makes his death even more suspicious. His son was also in the Navy and fought in World War II. His death happened just a few days before the missing diary of Admiral Byrd came out. Coincidence? I don't know. That's a lot of coincidence, Mary.
It's a lot of coincidence, Haley. So Byrd died in his sleep in 1957, but that last Antarctic expedition was 1955 to 1956, where they set up McMurdo. I wonder if he went back and saw more things. And there's a little bit of suspicion surrounding his death.
That's interesting.
But I tend to believe that, yes, there's just too many coincidences there. There was something massive that they found under the ice, and I think Byrd did fly into that. And maybe it doesn't correlate to hollow earth. Maybe there is just some sort of a base under there. I don't know. We have that scripture that we can find in the Bible about the giants, how they were there in the days of Noah, but they were also there in the days after. And there's a lot of theories on what that means. But some claim that they went into the earth and that they survived. But another theory about Antarctica that we haven't talked about yet is the ice wall. Again, Byrd, we have that cryptic message, and that was at the end of that episode, about there being lands much larger and greater beyond the South Pole. So if we're looking at the ice wall theory,
like on Game of Thrones, and that ice wall. And I just have to say, that would be a terrifying thought if you've watched that show. If you haven't, highly recommend to go watch that.
We're just recommending shows.
Yes, we have all kinds of great show recommendations. I definitely hope there's no walkers beyond that ice wall. Let's keep them out.
This theory also suggests that Antarctica is actually a giant wall of ice, that they've been lying to us. It's not actually a continent, and that this ice wall circles our known land masses, and that on the other side of the wall lies more land and lost civilizations and different forms of life. It's really just one of the most fantastical of these theories. There are certain breaks in the ice that allow us to go visit, these other lands, or they come over the ice wall and come visit us. So the globe images that we have, people would say that the images that we find from space are all manipulated by NASA and photoshopped or AI generated into spheres, and that they should all be flat. The governments know this, but they wanted to maintain control of this known world of ours. Aliens could just be visitors, and other advanced races are also just visitors from beyond the ice walls. But there are a lot of different theories on how beyond the ice wall works. From a snowman-like stacked world where the South Poles are all entrances to each world, to the flat earth theory, which comes from the odd wording in the Bible. God said, "Let there be a dome in the middle of the water. Let it divide the water from the water." The dome divided the water under the dome from the water above the dome. And this is how it was. And God called the dome sky. So there was evening and there was morning, a second day. God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let dry land appear." And this is how it was. And so this is Genesis 1, 6 through 9. And this was a very old Bible that I found this interpretation out of. And the word dome is also the firmament. So if you hear about the firmament, this is what they're talking about: the division of our world to the heavens and to the underworlds. So the Bible also speaks about four corners of the earth, and the pillars of the earth rests on. So biblically, there might be a tiny claim for flat earthers to cling to, and flat earth was believed by everyone until, again, Aristotle and the circumnavigation of the world began. No one fell off the edge. But then again, the ice wall would have prevented that, right?
I've got to say, I haven't gotten into the flat earth theory, but there must be something compelling, Mary, because this is not something that has died off and won't die off anytime soon. There are so many people who are flat earthers, and they're stoic about it. Like, no, the earth is flat, and capital letters flat.
Yeah, I mean, it totally is. There's like Flat Earth Dave. If you go there and start digging in there, you can find some of those reasons. And some of them are compelling. I'll give them that. And I understand their claims with the flat horizons and the pilots not having to adjust for a curve, and how if you look at a flight pattern over a globe, they aren't taking the shortest route. But if you flatten that globe out and put it on a map form instead, then it is the shortest route. So if you start looking into those theories, it only makes your truth stronger, like what you think. Again, back to that scientific method, you're going to form a hypothesis, and you're going to do an experiment, and you're going to come to your own conclusion. When we do that, it just makes our truth stronger. It makes you smarter because, you're learning about something about history or science if you're really digging into and researching. I'm not talking about going to Google, typing in the first prompt, and reading that first thing. You're going to go back about 100 pages. And actually, I would highly recommend just going to the library and finding the old books. So go out there, do your own research on flat earth and the ice wall, the globe earth, the stacked worlds, all of that, and come back and let us know.
The stacked world is super crazy, like a snowman type thing is what I'm envisioning. And with that, we're back to Antarctica. So let's see, we covered the Nazis, hollow earth, aliens. We touched a little bit on lost civilizations, and I think we should dig into that a little more. According to science, that is our new bad word. But science claims that she, meaning Antarctica, is like 35 million years old. So like most of our continents today, Antarctica was once believed to be attached to Australia, South America, Africa, India, Madagascar, and New Zealand. And together, they were the supercontinent Gondwana. Remember learning about that in school, Mary?
I don't. I gotta say, I only remember learning about Pangea. Gondwana feels new to me. So I looked it up while you were talking because I'm like, what the heck is Gondwana? And yeah, it was never taught in schools, only Pangea, which is wildly interesting to me. Why are we learning about Pangea and not this Gondwana?
It is odd. I think they didn't prepare for the internet and the ability for everyone to do their own research. It is odd, but like we say, those who control history control the world. And we wouldn't even be having these discussions if we knew the truth. And there is a little saying, to the victor writes the history. But anyways, Antarctica was not always a frozen world. She was once lush and tropical. Her mountain ranges, the geological makeup, it matches the mountain ranges on the mountains of the other continents that she broke free of. So we know her original climate from that, but also from pollen spores found deep within the ice. These aren't just a few spores that could have blown in. There are distinct concentration of pollen spores from extinct tropical foliage, as well as other fossils of forest trees and vegetation. You have to wonder, how did that get into the ice? That means it was there, right? So Antarctica was at one time warm and thriving. With the little we know about ancient people like the Mayans and such, it would stand to reason that there would be remains of older civilizations under the ice. On Google Earth, people have found what appears to be a four-sided pyramid in Antarctica. And I have to say, it looks like a pyramid. Have you seen that, Mary?
Yeah, I agree on that one. It is definitely a pyramid shape. We'll actually put the coordinates in our show notes. So everybody who has Google Earth Plus or whatever that's called, you can go and pop that out for yourself if it hasn't been blurred out. There are a few possible pyramids that people have found, but I would say only this one that we're going to put the coordinates to is a pyramid. The other ones, I kind of agree, it's probably just a mountain. But on Google Earth, you can also find there have been several unnatural openings that people have discovered, some along the shoreline, some on the interior, and even that strider creature. That's a fun one to find on Google Earth. But, that one is blurry. You can kind of really make out what it is. Some people say it's just a person who's like fallen over in its legs. But, what we like to say is if there's not a blurry photo, then it's not real.
We probably should put that on a shirt or something. And I just to mention, we have been working on some Rebel Road merchandise. Mary and I are brainstorming all kinds of different options. So if any of our listeners have any suggestions, definitely contact us. We'd love to hear from you. You could send us an email, rebelroadguests@gmail.com. Anyone who may want to come onto the podcast remotely and share your story, and feel free to remain anonymous. I know some people definitely want to share their story, but would be maybe a little nervous to come forward and with their name out there. So remember, you can always be anonymous if you want to join us on the show.
Absolutely. We're super laid back here. We promise. But we definitely would love feedback and would like some suggestions on what you want us to dig into next or how we're doing, things like that. If you love the show, please share the podcast with your friends and family and take a few seconds and give us that 5-star review. We're also on YouTube now. Yay! Just audio, but you can find and follow us there too. But gosh, where were we? Oh, yeah, the ancient civilizations. Like with all ancient civilizations, you get those mysteries and the ancient advanced tech theories. And all of that can tie back to that Linda Moulton Howe interview. And you can actually find those on the History Channel. And once again, I highly recommend it. Go find it.
Yeah, it's very well done. You mentioned, what did you call it, Mary? It was a strider creature. I know what that is, but for our listeners, do you want to describe what that is? I know with the blurry photo, we may want to elaborate a bit on what that is.
Sure. So these striders are giant spider-like creatures that are said to roam the ice in Antarctica. They're white or pale gray in appearance, and there's a lot of mystery on surrounding where they come from. And they're also gigantic. They're bigger than men, or they're small like a dog. Their sizes are all over the map, but they're said to either have escaped from secret labs that men have created there, or they're guarding ancient sites from people finding them, or they've been unfrozen from the ice with all the scientific exploration going on. There's just lots of stories of where they come from, and they seem to be similar to the Antarctic sea spider, but definitely scarier, deadlier, and like I mentioned, much, much larger. They have red eyes and beak-like mouths. So when I hear that, I envision like that beak on a squid. Have you seen that? Then that's just terrifying. And you can find tales of military squads having battled them. There are stories of scientists who were traumatized by what they've seen, and I don't know if they're real, but if they are definitely horrifying.
Well, we can speak even in recent times. We know things can escape laboratories. So could possibly be more than just a little virus that is escaping a laboratory. So let's put that out there. And with everyone poking around down there in Antarctica in the name of science, you have to wonder, what are they going to unthaw, drilling into million-year-old ice? And I mean, has no one in any government seen the movie The Thing?
That's one of my son's favorite movies. And you're right. What the heck? No good comes from genetic manipulation or tampering or opening things that are sealed, namely million-year-old polar ice caps. Another fun urban legend that we can find down there in Antarctica is Organism 46b. So this is said to have been discovered by the Russian scientists. They're deep in Lake Vostok, which is one of those unfrozen freshwater lakes miles under the ice. In 1957, the Soviets established Vostok Station on top of this lake, which is why it got its name, Lake Vostok. And so in February of 2012, so kind of recently, they were actually finally able to breach the ice, and they reached that unfrozen lake below. Remember, they're excellent diggers. They have the deepest hole there. So a Dr. Podlaka claimed to have been part of the scientific expedition to explore the lake, and they encountered Organism B on their very first day. It's said to be super intelligent. It disabled their radio and alarm systems on that first day, and that the creature could release a venom from up to 150 feet away and that attacked the party exploring the lake. It said that it paralyzed one crew member who continued to tread water in that lake with a blissful smile as the organism approached him, used its arms, tore off its head, and then popped its remains in its mouth. I mean, that's better than any movie I've seen. But later, they claimed the organism stalked the group, displaying shape-shifting abilities, even able to mimic a human diver. And by time they realized that it wasn't one of their own, the thing had grabbed the diver who'd got too close to him and tore him to bits. The team was said to have been able to fight it, and it lopped off one of its tentacles. And even though that tentacle arm was severed, it managed to still slither across the room and strangle a crew member in the middle of the night. I mean, they finally trapped it. Why? Why are you going to trap it? And they brought it to the surface. And it said that the Russian government seized it and then told the press that nothing had been found and that there was nothing but a hoax if they heard anything. And there are several holes in this story and some inconsistencies about Organism 46b, but so most people do believe it was a hoax.
Well, the Russians never cover anything up. And to be fair, we just want to say no government ever covers anything up, ever.
Never have they ever. Antarctica, it's just so shrouded in mystery. And I wonder if part of that is because to us normal people, I'm going to use normal, it's just a sheet of ice. What possibly could be so super exciting there? We're all trying to invent things out of nothing. Or is it because we all know the governments of the world would not be spending so much time or money or energy or trying so hard to protect it, researching scientific, peaceful research, if there wasn't something amazing there in Antarctica? I mean, it has vast oil, coal, and gas reserves, as well as gold, platinum, copper, and iron. It has that volcano that spits gold out every day, but we don't drill it. We don't tap it. I'm for that. That's a good thing. But governments are greedy. Why?
It really is questionable. It seems like our governments can never come together to agree on anything, but oddly, they can agree on Antarctica. I'd like to have faith that they really are just trying to preserve it. But history, even a skewed history, teaches us that governments in power always have alternative reasons. And back to our Russian friends, during the Cold War between Russia and the U.S., we still did a joint research expedition to Antarctica together. Let's think about that. And what were they studying? I know there are gravitational anomalies in Antarctica and heck, really all over the planet, right? And not just there, but the Wilkes Land gravitational anomaly, it's super interesting. It is this massive meteorite crater, and the electromagnetic energy there is off the charts. It indicates that something heavy and dense like metal or another material is there.
Yeah, I'm just going to backtrack a little bit to that Cold War that you said with Russia and the United States having that joint operation. Ronald Reagan made that crazy speech to the UN about there needing to be an alien invasion for the countries to join together. And we'll drop that here so you can listen to that.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war?
I mean, that's just amazing, right? And then back to what you're talking about, the Wilkes Land gravitational anomaly. We also have that South Atlantic anomaly that you can't even fly over. You'll lose all control. And even satellites can't fly over it either because they claim that it's a dent in the Earth's magnetic shield there. What's there? Well, what is that all about? Was it caused by the Operation Argus, when they were nuking very close to down there up in the ionosphere?
There's really so many questions, and I think we could go all day about the weird that comes from talking about Antarctica. Did you know they find the most meteorites there in Antarctica?
Did you know if you get to visit, you cannot take anything from the continent? They say to take a picture, mark its location, and don't touch it.
Well, probably because you may unfreeze a dangerous bioweapon or an alien. Whatever the reason, Mary, would you want to go?
Sign me up. I'm leery of traveling around the world now, but I would be brave enough to go to the bottom of the world. I'd buy a red parka for that.
You can send me photos. It's going to be way too cold for me. I'm more of a desert girl myself, but definitely if you go, we'll post some photos. I think we have done Antarctica some justice today and spread a little more awareness about the weird surrounding it and the weird in the government surrounding it.
Ooh, I hope so. But folks, dust off that library card, go dig in and do some research. Then come back and definitely let us know what you found and what you think. So is it aliens, hollow earth, government cover-ups, ancient tech? Portals? Oh my gosh, we never even got to portals. What do you think's going on down there in Antarctica?
Well, we're going to save that for another episode. And remember, if you liked this episode, please share it with someone you know and be sure to subscribe. We will be back next week with another tasty road snack, and I think we're keeping it frosty. Mary?
Yep, well, it's winter, so we're moving up north about 10,000 miles away to the mountains of Russia.
Well, keep your boots on, friends, and remember, keep it weird, and when all of it gets to be too much, pull it back to Jesus.
Bye.
Bye.